Slender is arguably one of the most prolific indie horror games ever released in modern times, and has managed to make its way into our culture in a bang, whether it be the original game, a movie, or even inspired crimes based on it. Like many games that hit this popularity, you have a speedrun community trying to beat this game as quickly as possible. Slender The Eight Pages is a fairly short speedrun with the current world record being held by Ruiner Ryan at a time of 2 minutes and 45 seconds. While the runtime for this game may be incredibly short, it's a result of continuous grinding because the luck required is absolutely ridiculous. This video will be going over how lucky you truly have to be to collect the 8 pages and a Slender World Record. Slender is a short speedrun, all things considered. The primary speed tech is managing your stamina since, unlike other games, it's a bit strange in that every time you sprint, you lose part of your maximum sprint length for some reason. The upside is that we do have a trick where you can mash the sprint button and this allows you to get more value out of your sprints. However, I'm not entirely sure why this works. As well, every page you gather amps up the aggression of the Slender Man, meaning he becomes more and more relentless as the game goes on. As a side note, most speedruns are done on version 0.91 of the original game. This is likely due to the fact that movement speed was buffed and the page spawns weren't heavily changed to avoid certain location combos that coincidentally are very useful for the speedrun route. As well, the fact that it is only about 3 minutes means realistically the odds should be favorable. All you would need to do to beat Slender The Eight Pages is gather the titular 8 pages and await the sweet embrace of the Slender Man. The map itself is fairly small and only has 10 locations you'd have to search. These include the scary tree, the rocks, the campsite, the tunnel, the truck, the bathrooms, the cut woods, the oil tankers, the wall, and the silo. From these 10 locations, only 8 of them would have pages. This is where things start to get interesting. While the idea of collecting 8 pages in 3 minutes sounds incredibly simple, if one were to grind for world record, it gets a bit more complicated. The problem? Every playthrough of Slender randomly generates the map, and its 8 pages between these 10 locations. In total, we end up having 1,814,400 possible permutations of Slender page spawns. However, it's not entirely this strict since we only need a certain combination, and the spawn order of these wouldn't really matter. Ultimately, we end up with 45 total combinations, with 1 perfect seed, or about a 2.2% chance. Looking at our perfect Slender route, we start left and make our way over to the scary tree. At this point, we immediately head on over to the campsite. We then grab the next page from the truck, which also has us in proximity to grab the tunnel page, the bathroom page, and the oil tanks page. From there, we go to the cut woods, and after, we grab our 8th and final page at the wall. While in theory, there's nothing stopping a speedrunner from taking any of the 45 potential routes, the perfect route is really the only one to allow the player to make it through the game at a world record pace. Not to mention, even casually, if you end up having to check more than 8 locations, it usually means you're about to get slended, due to his increasingly aggressive AI and your terrible stamina. I also want to make a quick note that this math will be assuming that the spawns are weighted equally. It's not exactly easy to dive into the code and see exactly how things are decided, and runners of this game frequently complain about the tanker truck being particularly rough for RNG. It's most likely given the odds that 1 of 45 runs will get off the ground. Now, I know what you're thinking. 2% isn't that bad. In fact, it'd be better odds than getting a 5-star gacha pull in something like Genshin, a knife in CSGO, or even an unusual hat in TF2. And you'd be correct, if this were the only factor. The RNG would be palatable if it were limited to the base spawn locations. One would assume if you were to get the 2% chance, you should be good to go, right? The problem is not only does the game have base spawn points, but it also has sub-spawn points. Having the pages be in only one spot per area would be too easy, so in addition to spawning the page between the 10 locations, every location has sub-locations they can spawn in. Now, as a note, I won't be counting the ones in the silo or the rocks, since at this point we would only be looking at our theoretical perfect route. While looking at these, I'll mention which are good or okay to have, and which ones can be considered lethal for a run. Some of the diverse spawns in an area are much more minor, while others entirely deviate your route, meaning both you and your run will be slended if attempted. So this time we have the Scary Tree, with 4 sides of the tree having all spawns. With this one, if we get front and right, we should be fine, while back and left are bad. This gives us a 50% chance of getting out of the tree. Although, realistically, they aren't all bad, it's early enough in the run that it's worth a reset. The Camper. The pages can be on the truck, or the left side, or even the back of the cabin, totaling to 3 locations. Weirdly enough, with the way these are clumped, there really isn't a bad spawn here, so any of the 3 would actually be fine. The Tanker Truck. So we can see there are many of the fan-made guides or maps listing 4 locations here, but from what I can tell from speedrunning, not only are truck spawns incredibly rare as a whole, but more importantly, there only ever seem to be 2 spawns, which are the left side and the back. Ideally, you would want the back, but it wouldn't be a total run killer if you'd have to go to the side. The Tunnel. Here's our first of the major differences. The tunnel is a long tunnel that can potentially have 3 page spawns, these being in the front, the middle, and the far end. We must get the front spawn here, since this page is directly tied to the bathroom page. While getting the middle wouldn't be lethal, you still would really prefer the front, so we can assume there is a 1 in 3rd chance of proceeding past the tunnel. If we have to go at all into the tunnel to get the page, this would throw off the whole route, since we would have to backtrack to get to the bathrooms. Now, in theory, we could just change the order, since we would be close to the cut woods. However, this also doesn't work, since at some point you would need to then be doing further backtracking, since you would end up needing to go to the wall at the end. In addition to this, the question does come to ask, why can't we just change the route to go to the rock instead? The problem becomes we have 3 pages directly next to each other and we must go in this order. If we have to go in any other direction, this would make world record impossible with how close these are. Continuing on, we have the bathrooms, which can contain a spawn in any of the 4 stalls. This is arguably the most brutal micro RNG in the game, since we absolutely must get the first bathroom closest to the tunnel. Having to travel deeper into any of the stalls would force us into losing more stamina, time, and potentially running into a surprise Slenderman encounter where he'll tell us, "Hey man, nice watch." The oil tanks. This RNG might appear to be initially daunting, however, there are only 4 spawns possible from the 10 tanks, 2 on the left and 2 on the right, the most ideal one being the top left one. The top right isn't too bad, however, at this point, having to proceed any further down would kill the run. You would not only have to go about halfway through the tanks, but you would also need to proceed further along the tanks, while the first location would allow you to instantly proceed to the next directly above it. We can say the odds of leaving the tanks are a 1 in 4 chance. The cut woods. This is by far the weirdest one, because we have in total 6 tree stumps. However, we actually end up around the first of the trees, with our intended exit being by the right side, since we are heading to the wall after this. Realistically, any tree is actually fine, since they are all easily accessible despite having the most spawns. For our perfect route, however, we will want one of the 2 trees on the right from where we enter, making this a 1 in 3 chance. However, if you did want to continue a run here, any are fine. The wall. This is the finale, and the pages can spawn on any of the 4 sides. At this point, most of the wall spawns aren't lethal, barring the far backside, since they are fairly close. However, for a perfect run, you would want the direct wall in the front, giving our perfect run a 1 in 4 chance. Looking at each required location we have to worry about, we have 1/2 chance from the tree, a 3rd chance from the tunnel, a 4th chance from the bathroom, a 4th chance from the oil tanks, a 3rd chance from the cut trees, and a 4th chance from the wall. we end up with about a 1 in 1,152 chance for our subspawns. Combining our total results, we end up with a very, very low 1 in 51,840 chance of getting a perfect run. What's wild is I decided to look up similar statistics and found that this is similar in chance to rolling a 6-sided die and getting a 6 times in a row, or apparently seeing the northern lights, which I didn't know was exceptionally rare.
I should be. Good Lord, what is happening in there?
While we do see there's a wildly low chance to get the perfect run, what about a run that can compete for a world record in theory? Let's assume you have the 1 in 45 chance and only want something usable. With this, we would only be looking at the subspawns and specifically the run killers, since having a bad spawn can still get the record at this point, especially since, as of the writing of this video, the record has been broken multiple times this year with the finding of better sprint management. The chances of a run dying would be the 1 in 2 at the tree, since it's early enough to warrant a reset, the 1 in 3 at the tunnel, since you can likely play off the middle spawn despite things being risky, the 1 in 2 at the oil tank, since anything that isn't the top tanks would be harmful. And in total, to have a passable run, you would need a 1 in 540 chance, which is much kinder. However, you would still be behind the perfect run by a bit. So, we figured out we already have a laughably low chance of getting the perfect run, but we haven't even talked about the big man himself, or should we say, the Slender Man himself. Slender Man throughout the game will chase the player as you continue to gather pages. The catch is, as you collect more and more pages, Slender Man gets more and more aggressive. Naturally, this is a fairly common horror trope, with stalker mechanics and normally wouldn't be any real issue since speedrunners tend to be masters of their game and learn how these enemies work, right? The problem is, Slender Man's a dick. The best way to go over him is by going at the game's pace. So as we proceed, here is what will generally happen. At page 1, nothing happens unless you AFK for too long. At page 2, Slender Man spawns into the game and begins searching. From pages 3 through 7, search and chase mode are happening with ramping speed as you gather the pages. At page 8, Slender Man is in chase mode at maximum speed and aggression. The key thing is search and chase mode, which is the meat of how he all works. The general idea is that Slender will teleport around searching for the player. If the player has the light on or is sprinting or close enough, they are more likely to be spotted, leading to chase mode, which will have Slender teleport after the player until they get enough distance or keep him in place for too long by staring at him from behind a tree, or dying or something like that. Now, this currently seems straightforward, however, we have a problem when we look further into search mode. Search mode has Slender randomly teleporting around the map at various speeds to try and locate the player. You would assume there's some kind of pattern to this. Kind of. Slender Man searches for the player by randomly teleporting around the map. At all moments, he is just randomly hopping around at varying speeds. While in the late game, he will generally hone in to try and be closer to the player's position since he has more aggressive detection and speed. But what about the early game? In the early game, Slender is still teleporting randomly, albeit much slower, even though he ideally won't be catching onto the player. Part of the charm of the original game was that he really was unpredictable, which brings us to the grand problem. Not only are you rolling the dice against the game's placement of the pages, you are also going to be held at the mercy of Slender Man himself, since at any moment, in theory, he can spawn directly near you. Now, this isn't entirely negative. While yes, he will be able to kill the player at this position, if they were caught in the bathrooms for instance. Slender Man has one more key element I haven't told you, which is his jump scare will actually increase the player's stamina. In the very beginning of this video, I mentioned that every time you sprint, your maximum sprint duration is decreased. The catch is, jump scares actually allow you to have longer sprints, with the catch being you need to manage the Slender Man. With all of this information, it's not exactly easy to quantify this into numbers, given not only is the entirety of the run starting with page 2 random, This can also be positive or negative, depending on how he spawned. Although it should be noted, in most cases the effort to keep Slenderman at bay will likely make this into a negative. Slender The Eight Pages is an intense dice roll of a speedrun, and the perfect run is incredibly unlikely for runners to achieve. However, luckily for us, speedrunning isn't always about playing the odds perfectly. While being incredibly low, you'd still be able to have a shot at record with only a 1 in 540 chance. Currently, the game is broken open with the development of sprinting tech changes, allowing for multiple records to occur just this year alone, meaning right now is actually the perfect time to break on into Slender The Eight Pages. If you're a gambler and want to take on the Slenderman, I encourage you to give it a go, and may the odds be in your favor to get that 1 in 51,840 chance perfect run. I hope you enjoyed this dive into speedrunning RNG and the horror that is the Slenderman. If you like this video, remember to leave a comment and hit the like button. Subscribe too if you want to see more videos like this, and remember, good luck out there.